The cinematic narrative unfolds in the tumultuous year of 1789, amidst the backdrop of the monumental French Revolution. The French populace, beleaguered by a series of calamities, is driven to the brink of revolution, which in turn ushers in a fresh wave of catastrophes. The citizens of France, wearied by persistent food scarcity and a pervasive economic downturn, rise in rebellion against the monarchy. Consequently, the revolutionaries orchestrated the execution of King Louis XVI along with 11,000 of his loyalists, before setting their sights on the final Queen of France, Marie Antoinette. Concurrently, an ambitious artillery officer from Corsica, Napoleon Bonaparte, is on a quest for advancement in rank. Meanwhile, Queen Marie Antoinette met her end at the guillotine in the central square, inciting jubilation and cheers among the crowd. Napoleon, however, observes the spectacle with a sense of unease, resolved not to meet a similar end. Shortly thereafter, Commissioner Paul Barras brings to Napoleon's attention the dire news of the British fleet's capture of the port city of Toulon. He warns Napoleon that if the British are not thwarted, France stands to lose the battle to England. Barras implores Napoleon to devise a swift solution to the crisis. Recognizing the strategic importance of a fortress armed with cannons, Napoleon suggests its capture. Over the course of several days, a French army detachment prepares itself for an impending bloody confrontation. Meanwhile, Napoleon arrives at Toulon to survey the situation and monitor the British forces' movements. His troops engage in the task of melting down old weaponry to manufacture explosives and cannonballs. As night descends and the British soldiers indulge in revelry, Napoleon initiates the assault on the fortress. He commences the operation by triggering a series of explosions as a diversion, following which the soldiers ascend Toulon's tower using ladders. Undeterred by the prospect of falling in battle, Napoleon joins the offensive. However, a shell strikes his horse, but this does not deter the determined officer. He scales the fortress, aiding his soldiers in overpowering the enemy. Upon seizing the high ground, the French forces turn the British cannons against their own fleet, setting the nearby ships ablaze. As dawn breaks, Napoleon is rewarded for his successful mission with a promotion to the rank of Brigadier General. On July 27, 1794, the Reign of Terror came to an end, as it became evident that it was impossible to execute every individual who posed a threat to the government. Robespierre is overthrown and attempts to evade capture, resorting to shooting himself in a bid to end his life, leading to his sentencing to the guillotine, and subsequently 41,500 prisoners are liberated, tasting the sweetness of long-awaited freedom. Subsequently, at a ball held in honor of the victims, Napoleon is smitten by a captivating woman and is instantly drawn to her, making efforts to acquaint himself with her. The following morning, he is visited by the son of Officer Dare, who requests the return of his late father's weapons. Complying with the boy's request, Napoleon encounters the boy's mother, Josephine, who is none other than the enchanting woman he had noticed at the ball. A romantic relationship blossomed between the pairs, and it wasn't long before they discovered their deep affection for each other. On October 5, 1975, a significant event unfolded: a royalist rebellion. The insurgents, with the intention of installing a new monarch, planned a coup d'etat. They had a numerical advantage, being 4 times the size of the government forces, and aimed to seize control of Paris to actualize their scheme. However, their plan was thwarted by an unexpected encounter with a contingent of Napoleon's troops. In the aftermath of this event, Napoleon and Josephine tied the knot, harboring hopes of soon welcoming an heir. In July 1798, Napoleon, having already subdued Italy without resistance, embarked on a mission to Egypt with the aim of liberating territories and transforming the country into a French colony. Despite being outnumbered, Napoleon emerged victorious in the Battle of the Pyramids. He took a keen interest in the cultural artifacts of the foreign land, especially the tombs and sarcophagi of the Egyptian pharaohs. Napoleon had no immediate intentions of returning home, but he was informed that his wife, Josephine, had taken a lover named Charles, who was a decade her junior. Initially, Napoleon was skeptical, but he eventually decided to return to France. Upon his arrival, he found his wife absent and realized that the rumors were indeed true. When Josephine returned to the castle, she was met with the sight of her belongings packed in suitcases in the courtyard, a clear indication that her husband had expelled her and no longer wished to see her. However, Napoleon's anger subsided, and he forgave Josephine, as his love for her outweighed all other emotions. The Directory's leaders summoned the general, who had left Egypt, accusing him of desertion. Napoleon, refusing to accept guilt or the label of a fugitive, countered by blaming the political leadership for plunging the country into bankruptcy during his absence. Shortly after, a man known as Mr. C visited the general's residence, proposing to overthrow the government and establish a provisional college of 3 consuls. Napoleon agreed to this plan and commanded his troops to arrest the officials who had looted the country's treasury. Whether they surrendered willingly or resisted, all officials were brought to a hall where they were forced to approve amendments to the Constitution that would allow Napoleon and 2 other distinguished gentlemen to assume the consul's seats. When the chiefs resisted, Napoleon's brother Lucien rallied the guard against them, coercing the deputies to vote in favor of the constitutional amendments at gunpoint. Napoleon and Josephine, widely respected and popular among the local populace, reveled in their affluent lifestyle, attending social gatherings and relocating to a more opulent castle. On the surface, everything seemed perfect, but the country's foreign policy was failing. France, on the brink of bankruptcy, was not held in high regard in Europe, and the formation of an alliance between Austria and England posed a threat that could annihilate France within hours. The foreign minister extended an offer of alliance to Austria, which was unequivocally rejected. Recognizing the inevitability of conflict, he implored Napoleon to ascend to the throne and guide his nation towards victory. On the 2nd of December, 1804, Napoleon was crowned by the Pope, who declared him the Emperor of the French. Despite his elevated status, Napoleon was plagued by concerns over Josephine's inability to provide him with an heir. As emperor, he yearned for a son, but this desire remained unfulfilled. Consequently, Napoleon prepared for war and issued an ultimatum to Josephine, threatening her divorce if she failed to conceive soon. In 1805, the Russian and Austrian emperors convened in a camp to strategize an assault on the French. Stationed at Austerlitz, they were confident of a collective triumph that would enable them to annex new territories and subdue France. Alexander I and Francis II were informed of the enemy troops' location and prepared a comprehensive attack involving nearly their entire army. It appeared as though France was destined for defeat, but Napoleon, aware of the enemy's approach, devised a clever trap. At the break of dawn, the infantry advanced towards the French camp positions, but they were allowed to approach unhindered. Following a direct confrontation with a small unit, the Austrian-Russian troops found themselves ensnared. Napoleon, concealed in the forest with the majority of his army, awaited the enemy's flank attack. Thousands of soldiers compelled the Allied army to retreat, fleeing into the icy surface of a frozen lake. Immediately thereafter, Napoleon commanded a concealed French battery to launch cannonballs, resulting in the downfall of most of the enemy. Subsequently, Napoleon engaged in negotiations with the Austrian emperor, seeking gratitude for sparing the armies of the Austrian and Russian empires from total annihilation, a feat he could have easily accomplished. In 1807, under his mother's insistence, Napoleon spent a night with a young woman to ascertain Josephine's fertility. The emperor compiled and executed his mother's task, after which he discovered that the woman was pregnant, confirming their suspicions. Despite his profound love for Josephine, Napoleon requested the minister orchestrate his wife's childbirth, intending to pass off his lover's child as their own. However, the aide declined to partake in such a scheme. 3 years later, Napoleon and Josephine ended their marriage. At one point, she refused to recite her lines, earning her a slap in the face. Despite this, the emperor vowed to remain close friends and correspond through letters, relocating Josephine to a rural castle. Later, Napoleon formed an alliance with Alexander I, aiming to persuade the Russian Empire to sever ties with England by imposing a continental blockade. To solidify the pact, Napoleon proposed a marriage between one of his sisters and him, but Alexander declined, citing her tender age. In his quest for a more dependable ally, Napoleon married Marie-Louise, the daughter of Francis II. A year later, the couple has a son, whom the emperor immediately takes to Josephine because he still loves her and wants to share this joy with her alone. However, in June 1812, the tranquility is shattered when Alexander I violates the terms of their alliance, opening the ports to England and inciting conflict. In response, Napoleon, feeling betrayed, decides to launch an invasion against the Russian Empire as a punitive measure for the broken treaty. The French forces embark on a perilous journey, only to be met with sporadic attacks from the Cossacks. The situation culminates in the gruesome Borodino massacre on September 7th, where 28,000 French soldiers lose their lives, not including the wounded. Despite the heavy losses, the emperor takes pride in his victories and keeps Josephine informed through letters. In the aftermath, the French troops march into Moscow, once a bustling city of 300,000 inhabitants, now lying in ruins. Napoleon is taken aback by Alexander's cowardice and retreat, and he decides to stay overnight to contemplate his next move. However, his plans are disrupted when he is awakened by a fire, learning that the Russians have set their own city ablaze, presumably with the intention to do the same to St. Petersburg. Napoleon contemplates capturing another city, but his plans are thwarted by the onset of a harsh winter. The French army, ill-prepared for the severe weather conditions, struggles to survive. The cold, coupled with hunger and a disrupted food supply chain, forces the army to retreat. Of the initial 600,000 men, a mere 40,000 survive. In May 1814, following this catastrophic military failure, Napoleon was compelled to abdicate. The Allies, in turn, grant him sovereignty over the island of Elba, ensuring him comfortable financial security for his remaining years. After nearly a year on Elba, Napoleon learns of Josephine's return to the social scene, including a meeting with the Russian Austrian emperor. Enraged, Napoleon escapes from Elba, commandeers a ship, and returns to France. The king, fearing the loss of his throne, dispatches troops to halt the usurper. However, Napoleon, addressing the soldiers who have their weapons trained on him, convinces them to join his cause. Moved by his impassioned speech, the army salutes their emperor. In a tragic turn of events, Josephine succumbs to a severe illness just before Napoleon's return. The Allies, unwilling to relinquish control over France to a distraught Napoleon, amass a formidable force. This includes 125,000 English soldiers, 120,000 Prussian soldiers, and 250,000 Frenchmen who have turned their backs on the emperor to protect the king. Despite being outnumbered, Napoleon boldly decides to strike first, targeting the British forces under the Duke of Wellington. His army advances towards Waterloo, but the attack is delayed due to heavy rain. Napoleon hopes for the ground to dry, but soon learns of the proximity of Field Marshal Blucher's Prussian army, forcing him to act. Napoleon leads his troops into battle, but the British forces successfully hold their ground, repelling the French attacks. The situation worsens when the Prussians join the fray, defeating the French. A sniper manages to seize Napoleon's headdress but spares his life as he retreats. Napoleon meets Wellington, offering his congratulations on the victory. They later meet again aboard an English ship. Instead of execution, Napoleon is exiled to an island in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. He spends 6 years in exile with his children, crafting his own version of history. On May 5, 1821, Napoleon breathed his last, comforted by the imagined voice of his beloved Josephine. And with that, the movie ends. We hope you enjoyed our video. Watch the next recaps on the screen and don't forget to subscribe for more amazing recaps. See you in the next one.